Wednesdays on RFL are legal nights, and first on the docket tonight, those new allegations of sexual misconduct against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Now, back when he was a student in high school and college, this is not the first allegation of its kind. Now, those revelations coming out in a new book out this week, and they seem to confirm the types of behavior that came out during his confirmation hearing. Drunken parties where Kavanaugh allegedly exposed himself and touched women with his genitals. Now, that would seem to bolster the claims made by Kavanaugh accuser Deb Ramirez, who provided names for the FBI to speak with, but whom, it turns out, were never contacted. And other classmates, they came forward after Christine Blasey Ford went public with her allegations against Kavanaugh, but the FBI reportedly never contacted them either. All of this prompting former federal prosecutor and friend to the program, Mimi Rocah, to pen this op-ed in USA Today this week titled, "Confirmed, Powerful Men Ignored Women in Short-Circuited Brett Kavanaugh Investigation." And for more, we welcome Mimi back to the program. Mimi, a distinguished fellow in criminal justice at Pace University Law School, and before that, she spent 16 years as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, when starting at the age of 5. Yes. All right. Mimi, first off, there's a couple portions of your editorial I wanted to read and do so verbatim. The first one, like the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings themselves, the new information about a short-circuited investigation of victims' claims isn't only about one Supreme Court justice. It's how women and sexual assault survivors are fed up with feeling silenced by men who control the levers of power, whether it's in the criminal justice system or in Congress. And I got that through a lot of thread lines, that there was a palpable frustration, which was, paraphrasing by some, this was a dog and pony show, never intended to get to where it was, but more than that, they wouldn't even do the basic lip service and follow through when people had enough courage to come forward here with additional information.
That's exactly right. This isn't even necessarily about the end result and about the fact that, Kavanaugh was confirmed. This is about the fact that from the first day, it was clear that none of, certainly the Republican senators, and frankly, even many of the Democrats, were committed to saying, okay, what really happened here? What are the facts? Can he be honest and open about them? And how does that impact our vote? Instead, it was they weren't going to have her testify at all. Then they let her Dr. Ford. Then they let her testify, but they did this, sham questioning where she got real questions, he didn't. He got questions from senators. She got questions through a, sort of real, quote unquote, prosecutor, which also was appalling, but in a different way. She actually got her story out, Dr. Ford's story out. Kavanaugh never really had to answer for what happened except to make blanket denials. Then they did that sham FBI investigation that, we knew at the time. So many people said they're not really doing, here are 30 people they should interview. And they, I think, maybe interviewed like 2 of them and didn't even interview the victims, the people who were making the claims, or Kavanaugh about this. So then we now get confirmation, and I know there's been some back and forth in the New York Times, but we now get some confirmation that not only didn't they go out at the FBI and interview people, but people tried to, corroborators, people who could have corroborated the victims, tried to reach out to the FBI and were ignored. And, again, it's not about the end result, it's about the process. And that's been happening for a long time in the criminal justice system and elsewhere. And this was just a really public example that really, I think brought up a lot of angry feelings of sort of, being left out of the system by women.
I want to go back, and then I want to go to what we just learned. I spoke to a lawmaker, and this was off camera, so I'll at least respect his privacy in this. And he said, we just felt that it was a he said, she said. And the longer it went, we were never going to get to the bottom of it. And I could see he was uncomfortable by it. Not necessarily unsympathetic, but uncomfortable. And he said, and there was due process. You mentioned this as well. This was never a trial.
Right. And
the idea to me that there was no rush or timetable or a shot clock here as it related to Merrick Garland, who went for a better part of a year with the vacancy on the High Court, but we had to get this thing through. We had to push it through. We had to only have a few days to give the FBI an ability to examine some of the additional claims. So much of it was a farce. Do you think it was purely political, or do you think that they believed they'd reached the same conclusion no matter how long this went to, and they didn't want to be part of a circus anymore?
A little bit of both. I mean, it certainly was political. It was result-oriented, at least on the Republican part. They wanted to get him confirmed, basically, no matter what, I think. But I think it also was, and this goes to sort of the bigger cultural question. I think when people, even some women, hear allegations by a woman against a man, particularly a well-respected man who, no, he doesn't do things like that. I mean, it's happened in, so think of Larry Nassar. I'm not saying
right.
Brett Kavanaugh is Larry Nassar, but people who are in respectable positions who get accused of things, people don't believe it at first. And so they think, well, there's never going to be, unless there's like a recording of it, why would I ever believe her over him? And here, it's first of all very circular, because the point is, first of all, she testified, and I think a lot of people, even Trump that day, sort of came out and said favorable things about her credibility. It wasn't people not believing her. They came up with this, ridiculous, well, yes, she was attacked, but it was someone else. She's just mistaken in her memory, because no one could really say she was lying. But they didn't do the investigation that would have led to the corroboration. I mean, this happens all over the country every day.
Because the part that I'm still confused at is, a lot of people came forward, credible people, to the FBI and said, talk to me. I was there.
Right.
And they didn't. And my question is, were they directed not to, or they said they couldn't do it because in the window of time, they just were never able to do it, so they were going to ignore it outright? Was it the FBI's decision or somebody else's directive to say, leave it be?
Look, I don't fully know the answer to that, and to me, that's the question now that we do need answers to. I don't think Brett Kavanaugh is getting impeached. I don't think that's happening. But I do think that a Democratic-controlled Congress could get answers to the question of why did the FBI stop. There were some noises at the time from the FBI that this was limited because it was just a background check, which isn't a full, criminal investigation. I understand that, but this is no ordinary background check, and no one says you can't do more. And if I were Brett Kavanaugh and none of these things had happened, I would want them to do the investigation to clear my name and to say, to not have this cloud over him and the court. But so I believe, based on things that I've read and heard, that it came from the White House to keep this as minimum as possible, that this was not the FBI. In fact, there are reports that the FBI said to Ms. Ramirez, we believe you, but we can't do more. Now, I don't know if those are true. That's what, a congressional oversight is for. And, to put a capper on it, when this all came out with the new revelations of the book, the president, of course, on Twitter said, the Justice Department needs to protect Brett Kavanaugh, as if, forget about a ref here with shirts and skins, that they're basically in the president's employ, of which they're not here, and that they're not in the business of protecting somebody, especially alleged to have been involved in sexual assault. Okay, that now brings us to what we saw yesterday, which I think, if you want an example about the people who are just concerned with government and people's vanishing faith therein in it and the concerns that brings along, I think we had Exhibit A last night on the floor of Congress, a sad display of democracy in decline. Former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, he testified before the House Judiciary Committee, and let's just say he and his former boss seem to have quite a bit in common. They refused to answer a whole lot of questions, citing a questionable White House claim of privilege, and this was his best behavior. Now, here's just some of what Lewandowski's behaving badly actually looked like yesterday.
Did you meet alone with the president on that date?
Congressman, I'd like you to refresh my memory by providing a copy of the report so I can follow along.
Yes or no? Read the screen.
You're welcome to read it, Congresswoman.
Are you the hit man, the bag man, the lookout, or all of the above?
I think I'm the good-looking man, actually.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is imaginary. It's like the tooth fairy. You didn't work for the president in the White House.
Thank you, Congressman.
I'm sorry?
My children were watching, so thank you for that. President Swalwell, I'm very happy of what I've written, but you're welcome to read it if you'd like.
Are you ashamed to read it out loud?
I'm not ashamed of anything in my life, Congressman. Are you?
Later, the counsel hired by the Judiciary Committee played Lewandowski a clip of an interview that he gave to MSNBC. Lewandowski, and just look at what followed.
That wasn't true, was it, sir?
I heard that.
And that was not true, was it?
I have no obligation to be honest with the media because they're just as dishonest as anybody else.
And yet, despite his admission that he lies to the media, CNN had Lewandowski on this morning, so you can go figure. But here's what I got questions, and I'm like, I don't even play an attorney on TV, but I'll ask one tomorrow, which was, wait a minute. If I got subpoenaed to go before Congress, since when would it be optional for me to even acknowledge a question, answer a question, or feel compelled to tell the truth? And why wasn't what I saw yesterday Exhibit A for contempt? What happened?
Well, look, I think in many ways it was contemptuous for sure and could have been legally contempt. So I do think that one option sort of theoretically available to the Democrats would have been to hold him in contempt. And contempt here would be for two reasons. One, he fell back on this, I'm just protecting the privilege that the president, is saying I should assert. Well, you have to have a good faith basis for asserting a privilege. And many of those questions that were asked, that privilege didn't even come into play. Like questions before Trump was even president. No one can argue
but
that.
Can I apologize?
Yeah.
Is privilege a black and white standard in that Lewandowski never worked for the administration? His formal relationship with the president ended, at least as any capacity here, when so did the campaign. So my question is, how does anybody just get to say privilege?
Right. I mean, Trump's definition of executive privilege is basically anyone he talks to because he's president, and anything he thinks, was presidential business, it applies. That's obviously not the definition. I think that you probably could find some lawyers, legal scholars to say, well, it's not this black letter, bright line rule that if you're not in the executive branch, the privilege doesn't apply, that the president talking to outside advisors. I mean, we know that because there is an Office of Legal Counsel opinion that says you can go outside the executive branch. I think that almost doesn't matter here because in these circumstances here, so I don't want to say never, ever, ever, but in these circumstances, he wasn't seeking advice outside of the executive branch. He, in fact, went outside the chain of command on purpose because he knew what he was trying to do was wrong, if not criminal, and that's why Corey Lewandowski didn't carry out the orders. He went to sort of his hitman, to get the job done. So it was certainly not seeking advice. It was giving an order, a direction of something that I believe was part of an obstruction of justice criminal conspiracy. So there's just no rational argument for executive privilege to apply here, even if you're in the school of thought that, maybe under some circumstances you could find a case where it applies beyond that. So I think it's a really bogus claim, and Lewandowski used it even in cases where it certainly wouldn't apply, bright line, because the president wasn't president yet. He was talking about the transition and saying, trying to withhold information there. Also, sometimes he just didn't answer the questions. He said he was answering them, but he didn't. The clips you played show how, contemptuous he was being. He was not there to give information. He tweeted that in the morning before he testified. He basically said, I'm looking forward to testifying, and, I forget what his exact wording was, basically exonerating the president.
Amazing the conversations that we have to have now. Mimi, I appreciate your time. All right, when we come back, everyone, President Trump, he's going after California once again. This time, it's about emission and pollution. The president, he wants to stop the state from requiring cleaner cars. You heard me right. It's hypocritical of Trump and Republicans to be sure, but the question is this legal? Well, the legal panel will weigh in on that after this.